Sir, this isn't your seat." The words cut through the first-class cabin like a verdict. Brenda's voice carried that edge, polite on the surface, accusatory underneath. Jimmie Roman looked up from settling into seat 3A. "I have a ticket. It's confirmed." He handed it over. She examined it under the overhead light, tilting it, squinting at it. Too long, way too long. She paused as a white man in an Armani suit appeared behind her. "That's my seat," Richard Caldwell said, not to Jimmie but to Brenda. "I've sat there for 5 years." "Mr. Caldwell?" Brenda's face brightened. "Of course. Sir." She turned back to Jimmie. "We need you to move." Passengers in nearby rows turned to watch. Whispers rippled through the cabin. A woman shook her head. A businessman frowned. "I purchased this seat 3 months ago," Jimmie said quietly. David Morgan, head flight attendant, strode forward. "Sir, we're asking nicely. Don't make this difficult." And what happened next would change everything. Jimmie Roman had flown first class hundreds of times. He knew the rhythm. Board early, settle in, maybe exchange pleasantries with the flight attendant, get offered a pre-departure beverage. Simple. This wasn't that. Brenda held his boarding pass under the overhead light, tilting it like she was checking for counterfeit bills. Her lips pressed into a thin line. Behind her, other passengers filed past, white faces in business casual designer luggage, confident smiles. Nobody checked their tickets twice. "This seat is 3A?" she asked. "Yes, ma'am. That's what it says." "And you purchased this yourself?" The question landed wrong. Jimmie felt it in his chest, that old, familiar weight, the assumption, the doubt. He'd built a $400 million private equity firm from nothing, owned significant stakes in 12 companies, including this airline. But right now, in this moment, he was just a black man in a hoodie who someone decided didn't belong. "I did," he said evenly. 3 months ago." Brenda's jaw tightened. She moved to the galley, whispering to another attendant. Jimmie caught fragments. "Verify. Just making sure. You know how it is." He knew exactly how it was. The cabin filled up around him. A woman in pearls smiled as she passed. A businessman nodded. Normal interactions with normal passengers. But when they looked at Jimmie, something flickered in their eyes. Curiosity mixed with wariness. Like they were wondering if he'd gotten lost on his way to coach. Then a voice boomed from behind him. "That's my seat." Jimmie turned. A white man in his 50s stood in the aisle, Armani suit perfectly tailored, silver hair immaculate. Everything about him screamed old money and older privilege. His cologne, something expensive, filled the small space. "I'm sorry," Jimmie said. "Seat 3A. I've sat there for 5 years." The man's tone wasn't aggressive, just matter-of-fact, like he was explaining gravity. "Every Tuesday flight to LA, it's tradition. I have a confirmed reservation. Richard Caldwell." The man extended his hand like he was granting an audience. "Platinum Elite member. I'm sure we can sort this out." Brenda reappeared, her face brightening when she saw Richard. "Mr. Caldwell, so good to see you again." "Brenda." He smiled warmly. "Seems there's been some confusion with my seat." "Your seat?" Jimmie kept his voice level, calm. He'd learned long ago that anger, for men who looked like him, was always weaponized against them. "I purchased this seat. I have a ticket." "I'm sure you do, but—" Brenda's hand fluttered nervously. "Mr. Caldwell has sat here every week for years. It's his spot. Maybe we could find you something in coach. I'm sure there's room. I paid for first class." "Of course, of course." Her smile was strained now, irritation creeping through. "But Mr. Caldwell is one of our most valued customers. Surely you understand. We take care of our loyal—" "I understand perfectly." Jimmie's fingers tightened around the armrest. The boarding pass crumpled slightly in his other hand, that golden yellow ticket, now a piece of evidence. You want me to give up the seat I paid for because he sat here before. It's not about that. Then what's it about? The cabin had gone quiet. Other passengers pretended to arrange their bags, but everyone was listening, watching. Jimmie could feel their eyes, their judgment forming in real time. Richard sighed, the sound of a patient man dealing with unreasonable circumstances. Look, I don't want to make a scene, but this is where I sit. It's important to me. I have work to do, calls to make. I need this specific seat. So do I. I'm sure you do, but... Richard's voice hardened slightly. I'm a Diamond member. I fly 200,000 miles a year with this airline. What are you? The question hung in the air like smoke. What are you? Not, what's your status? What are you? Jimmie felt something cold settle in his chest. He glanced at Brenda, saw the calculation in her eyes. She'd already made her choice. Let me get the head flight attendant, she said. He'll sort this out. She walked away, leaving Jimmie in his seat and Richard standing in the aisle, both men locked in a battle neither had chosen, but both understood perfectly. What started as a simple seat assignment was about to become something much bigger. David Morgan had been a flight attendant for 25 years. Head of cabin crew, 3 commendations, 0 tolerance for disruptions. He arrived at row 3 with the bearing of a man who'd handled 1,000 problems and would handle 1,000 more. His uniform was crisp, his smile was professional, his eyes were already tired. Gentlemen, he said, what seems to be the issue? Richard spoke first. David, thank God. This man is in my seat. Your seat, Mr. Caldwell? 3A. You know I always sit here. David nodded slowly, then turned to Jimmie. His expression shifted, not hostile, but guarded. Careful. Sir, may I see your boarding pass? Jimmie handed it over. The third time in 10 minutes. David examined it, glanced at Jimmie, then back at the pass. Something passed across his face, surprise maybe, or discomfort, but it vanished quickly, replaced by the mask of corporate policy. This is valid, he admitted. But Mr. Caldwell is one of our highest-tier members. He's been sitting in 3A for years. It's become his customary seat. Customary doesn't mean assigned. No, but it does mean something in customer service. David's voice carried the weight of authority. We value loyalty. Mr. Caldwell has flown with us 847 times. We take care of our most valued passengers. I paid for this seat. And we appreciate that. But we're asking, nicely, if you'd be willing to accommodate our long-standing customer. We have an excellent seat in coach 24B, right by the window. I don't want coach. I want the seat I purchased. The cabin was silent now. Every conversation had stopped. Passengers in rows 1 through 6 watched the scene unfold like a theater performance they hadn't paid for but couldn't look away from. David's jaw tightened. Sir, I'm trying to be reasonable here. So am I. I bought a ticket. I'm in my assigned seat. Mr. Caldwell flies this route every week. That's his choice. It doesn't obligate me to give up what's mine. Richard stepped forward, his patience wearing thin. Look, I don't know what you're trying to prove, but this is ridiculous. I need this seat. I have a conference call in 90 minutes that requires absolute focus. I've planned my entire schedule around sitting here. Just be reasonable. I am being reasonable. I'm sitting in the seat I purchased. David's expression hardened. The friendliness evaporated. Sir, if you continue to be uncooperative, I'll have no choice but to involve airport security. The threat landed like a slap. Jimmie's hands went still on the armrests. His breathing stayed even, but something shifted in his eyes, a flash of recognition. He'd been here before, different circumstances, same script, the black man being threatened for standing his ground. You're going to call security, Jimmie said quietly, because I'm sitting in the seat I paid for. I'm calling security because you're refusing to cooperate with crew instructions. Your instruction being to give my seat to him. My instruction is to resolve this situation quickly so we can depart on time. David pulled out his phone. Last chance. Move voluntarily to 24B, or I'll have you removed and placed on our no-fly list. The cabin held its breath. An elderly woman in row 2 shifted uncomfortably. A businessman looked down at his laptop. A mother pulled her daughter closer. Nobody spoke. Nobody defended him. The silence was its own verdict. Jimmie looked at Richard. Pressed suit, confident smile, the comfort of a man who'd never once doubted his place in the world. Then at David, jaw set, phone ready, a man just doing his job. Then at Brenda, hovering nearby, relief already showing on her face because she knew how this would end. They all knew how this would end. "I'll go," Jimmie said finally. David's shoulders relaxed. "Thank you for understanding." "I'm not." Jimmie stood slowly, gathering his bag. "But I'll go." He moved into the aisle. Richard immediately slid into 3A with the ease of reclaimed territory, already pulling out his laptop like nothing had happened. As Jimmie walked toward the exit, he paused at the door, turned back, looked at the cabin one last time, at Richard settling in, at David's satisfied nod, at Brenda's relieved smile, at the 287 passengers who'd watched it all happen and done nothing. "You'll remember this flight," he said quietly. Then he stepped off the plane, 3 months earlier. The boardroom of Roman Equity Partners occupied the entire 42nd floor of a Manhattan tower. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked Central Park. The conference table was Italian marble. 12 leather chairs surrounded it, but only one mattered. Jimmie Roman sat at the head, reviewing a stack of documents that would make most investors salivate. Acquisition targets, market analyses, due diligence reports. He stopped on page 47. Airline Airlines. Market cap, $3.2 billion. His firm's stake, 31%. Largest single shareholder. Anonymous holding through 3 shell companies, just the way he preferred it. The numbers were good. Revenue up, costs controlled, stock climbing steadily. But the other folder told a different story. His assistant, Maya, had compiled it over 6 weeks. Customer complaints, social media posts, employee grievances, the kind of data that didn't make it into quarterly reports, but revealed the soul of a company. 47 discrimination complaints in 6 months. All dismissed. All from passengers of color. All involving seat assignments, upgrades, or service disputes. The pattern was undeniable. Jimmie leaned back, the chair creaking softly. He'd built his fortune on pattern recognition, seeing what others missed, acting while others hesitated. This pattern screamed institutional rot. He pressed the intercom. "Maya, book me a ticket on Airline, first class, New York to LA, Tuesday route." "Which name, sir?" "My real one." A pause. "Sir?" "Jimmie Roman. My actual name. No corporate account, no special status. Just a regular ticket purchase." "May I ask why?" "I want to see how they treat customers when they don't know I own 31% of their company." He'd spent 3 years building that position, slowly accumulating shares through proxies and partnerships. The board knew Roman Equity held the stake. They didn't know Jimmie Roman, the man, was behind it. He preferred it that way. Invisibility was power, but invisibility also let companies forget who they served. The ticket arrived 2 days later. Seat 3A, first class, $2,400. Confirmation number in his email. Everything legitimate, everything proper. He scheduled the flight for 3 months out. Enough time to establish it was deliberate, planned, intentional. Not a spur-of-the-moment decision, but a calculated test. Then he waited. Now, standing in the jet bridge after being removed from flight AF 2847, Jimmie pulled out his phone. The screen lit up. A text from Maya. "All cameras in position. We have everything." He'd had 3 associates on that plane, scattered throughout the cabin. Discrete recording devices. Audio backup. Every word, every gesture, every moment of his humiliation captured in high definition. Not for revenge, for evidence. He opened his secure laptop, connected to the private network. The Airlink internal system loaded, full access, courtesy of his shareholder rights that the company had granted but never expected him to use. The data poured in: complaint logs, employee emails, service records. He'd been reviewing them for weeks, but now he had context. Now he had his own experience to compare against the patterns. David Morgan's file appeared first. Head flight attendant for 8 years. 43 recorded instances of seat reassignments in the past 18 months. 38 involved moving passengers of color from premium seats to accommodate white passengers. 0 disciplinary actions. 2 commendations for exceptional customer service. Brenda Moss, 6 years with the airline. 21 similar incidents. Always deferring to valued customers. Always assuming the problem was the passenger who didn't look like they belonged. Richard Caldwell, Diamond Elite member, 847 flights. And here was the interesting part: 17 documented complaints against him for aggressive behavior, inappropriate comments, and demanding special treatment. All dismissed as misunderstandings. The system protected him. It always protected people like him. Jimmie's jaw tightened as he scrolled deeper. Then he found it, buried in the maintenance logs, flagged by an automated system but overridden by human judgment. Engine number 2 on aircraft N847AK, the plane he'd just left, was 1,147 hours overdue for inspection. Critical alert, ignored. The inspection signature was forged. The chief engineer who supposedly signed off had retired 4 months ago. His fingers went cold. That plane, with Richard in seat 3A, with David and Brenda serving passengers, with 287 people who'd watched him get removed, was about to take off with a potentially catastrophic mechanical failure. He had maybe 10 minutes. Jimmie didn't hesitate. He dialed. FAA Emergency Hotline, what's your situation? This is Jimmie Roman, majority shareholder of Airline Airlines. Flight AF 2847 is about to depart JFK with a compromised engine. You need to ground it immediately. The FAA operator's voice sharpened. Sir, I need you to verify your identity. Jimmie Roman, Roman Equity Partners. Check your database. I'm listed as primary contact for Aerolink's Safety Compliance Board. His words came fast, clipped. Aircraft registration N847AK, flight AF 2847, scheduled departure in 8 minutes. Keys clicked in the background, a pause that stretched too long. Mr. Roman, our system shows you as authorized. What's the nature of the emergency? Engine number 2 hasn't been inspected in over 1,200 hours. The maintenance log shows a forged signature from an engineer who retired 4 months ago. That plane cannot take off. How do you have access to? Because I own 31% of the airline and I've been investigating them for 3 months. The engine has a stress fracture. I have thermal imaging from last week's automated scan that was overridden. If that plane reaches 10,000 feet, the pressure differential will stand by. The line went silent. Jimmie pressed the phone against his ear so hard it hurt. Around him, the terminal buzzed with normal airport chaos, rolling luggage, gate announcements, the smell of coffee and jet fuel. Everything ordinary while disaster waited on the tarmac. Through the window, he could see AF 2847. The engines were running. The jet bridge had retracted. His phone buzzed with an incoming message. Maya had sent the thermal scan, bright red along the engine casing. A fracture line 12 centimeters long, the kind of damage that started small and ended catastrophic. He'd found it 2 days ago while combing through automated safety reports. The kind of reports that got filed, flagged, and then buried when they became inconvenient. Someone had overridden the alert. Someone had forged the inspection signature. Someone had decided 287 lives were less important than staying on schedule. The FAA operator returned. Mr. Roman, we're dispatching a ground stop order now. That aircraft will not be cleared for takeoff. How long? 90 seconds. We're contacting the tower directly. Through the window, AF 2847 began rolling backward, pushed by the tug. Standard pushback procedure. 30 seconds from releasing brakes, 60 seconds from taxiing, 3 minutes from being airborne. Jimmie's throat tightened. Richard Caldwell was in seat 3A right now, probably on his conference call, completely unaware. David and Brenda were preparing the cabin. 287 people scrolling phones, reading magazines, dozing off. All of them about to die if that engine failed at altitude. His laptop screen filled with more data. He couldn't stop looking now. Couldn't unsee what he'd found. The rabbit hole went deeper than a single forged signature. Aerolink's entire maintenance department was compromised. 72 aircraft in their fleet, 19 with overdue critical inspections, 8 with forged documentation. The chief of maintenance, Thomas Brennan, had been systematically falsifying records for 18 months to meet schedule demands. And the executive team knew. Email after email, buried in archived servers. CFO Margaret expressing concerns about maintenance costs. COO demanding creative solutions to reduce downtime. Brennan responding with charts showing optimized inspection schedules. A corporate euphemism for skipping safety checks. They'd traded lives for quarterly earnings. Jimmie's hands shook as he scrolled. This wasn't just about racism anymore. This was corporate manslaughter waiting to happen. His phone rang, FAA again. Ground stop confirmed. AF 2847 is returning to gate. We're sending inspectors immediately. Tell them to check engine 2 for stress fractures and get the maintenance logs for every plane in Aerolink's fleet. You're going to find more. Mr. Roman, are you making an official report? I'm making a formal complaint as majority shareholder, and I'm requesting an immediate investigation into maintenance fraud. Through the window, AF 2847 had stopped moving. Even from here, Jimmie could imagine the confusion inside. The pilot's announcement. Ladies and gentlemen, we've been instructed to return to the gate due to a maintenance issue. Maintenance issue. Such bland words for near death. His laptop chimed. Another message from Maya. Media monitoring shows nothing yet. But airport security is asking questions. Your call? Do we go public? Not yet. First, he needed to see their faces when they realized what had almost happened. He pulled up the security camera feeds, another shareholder privilege he'd never used until today. The cabin of AF 2847 filled his screen, passengers confused, frustrated, some checking watches, some sighing, normal irritation at a delay. Richard Caldwell looked annoyed, closing his laptop with visible aggravation. David walked down the aisle, professional smile fixed in place, assuring passengers it would just be a moment. Brenda stood in the galley, whispering to another attendant, probably complaining about the disruption. None of them knew. None of them understood that the man they'd humiliated 20 minutes ago had just saved their lives. Jimmie's jaw clenched. The rage came in waves, not hot and explosive, but cold and clarifying. They'd judged him by his skin, dismissed him as unworthy, threatened him with security, removed him from a seat he'd purchased, and he'd still saved them. His phone buzzed again, this time a call from an unknown number. Mr. Roman? A woman's voice, tight with stress. This is Margaret, CFO of Aerolink. I've just been informed by the FAA that you made an emergency report regarding one of our aircraft. That's correct. I'd like to understand the situation before... Before what? Before the FAA grounds your entire fleet? Before the media finds out you've been flying passengers on planes with forged safety inspections? Silence. Mr. Roman, I think there's been some kind of misunderstanding. I have the emails, Margaret. I have the maintenance logs. I have thermal scans showing a 12-centimeter stress fracture that was flagged, overridden, and covered up. I have documentation of 19 aircraft currently flying with expired inspections. And I have my own experience from 30 minutes ago that shows exactly what kind of company you're running. Your experience? I was removed from seat 3A on flight 2847 because I didn't look like I belonged in first class. Your head flight attendant threatened me with security. Your attendant questioned my ticket 3 times, and your valued customer assumed that 5 years of tradition trumped my confirmed reservation. Her breathing changed. I didn't know. You didn't want to know. Just like you didn't want to know about the maintenance fraud or the discrimination complaints or any of the other rot I've been documenting for 3 months. Who are you? I'm the majority shareholder, and as of right now, I'm taking direct action. He ended the call. Through the window, emergency vehicles surrounded AF 2847. FAA inspectors climbed aboard. The passengers were being deplaned, confused, some angry, all alive. All alive because he'd been there, because he'd been humiliated, because he'd refused to accept their judgment of him. The irony was almost funny. Jimmie closed his laptop, picked up his bag, turned toward the terminal exit. He had 48 hours to decide what came next, 48 hours to choose between quiet divestment or public reckoning. But deep down, he already knew. Some things couldn't be fixed quietly. The FAA inspector's voice crackled over the radio, patched through to the Emergency Operations Center. Jimmie stood in the airport security office, listening through a supervisor's headset they'd reluctantly allowed him to use. Confirmed visual on Engine 2. Multiple stress fractures along the turbine casing. This bird was maybe 2 flights from catastrophic failure. The room went silent. The security supervisor, a gray-haired man named Patterson, pulled off his glasses and rubbed his eyes. Jesus Christ! Jimmie's phone lit up with the official FAA photo. The engine casing, split open for inspection, revealed fracture lines spiderwebbing across the metal like frozen lightning. Red tags marked each one. 17 critical points of failure. At cruising altitude, with cabin pressure at maximum differential, any one of those fractures could have propagated into a full breach. The engine would have exploded. Shrapnel through the fuselage, decompression, fire, 287 people falling from the sky. Patterson looked at Jimmie with something between respect and horror. You knew about this? I suspected. The maintenance logs showed the inspection was overdue. I found the forged signature yesterday. And you were on that flight? Until they removed me for sitting in my assigned seat. The words hung there, heavy with implication. Patterson's jaw tightened. I'm going to need you to file a formal statement, both about the safety issue and the other matter. Already prepared. Jimmie pulled out a flash drive. Everything's documented. 3 months of research, 47 discrimination complaints that were dismissed. Maintenance records showing systematic fraud, email chains proving executive knowledge, and video footage from today showing exactly how your airline treats passengers who don't fit their preferred profile. My airline? You work for them, don't you? I work for airport security, but I take your point. Patterson plugged in the drive, his screen filling with files. His expression darkened as he scrolled. This is extensive. It's evidence. On the tarmac, passengers from AF 2847 streamed into the terminal, confused, angry, demanding explanations. Some had been on that plane for 40 minutes, sitting in their seats, engines running, ready for takeoff, ready to die. Jimmie watched them through the window. A businessman shouting into his phone about missed meetings. A mother clutching her daughter, relief not yet overriding her irritation. A young couple arguing about rebooking. And there, Richard Caldwell, striding through the crowd with the confidence of someone accustomed to having problems solved for him. He approached the gate desk, his voice carrying across the terminal. This is unacceptable. I have a critical meeting in Los Angeles. You need to get me on the next available flight first class immediately. The gate agent typed frantically. Sir, I understand your frustration, but we're currently grounding the aircraft for safety. I don't care about safety protocols. I care about getting to LA. Richard's face flushed. Do you know how many miles I fly with this airline? Do you understand what Diamond Elite means? Jimmie felt something twist in his chest. That man had demanded his seat. That man had sat in 3A without a second thought, secure in his privilege, certain of his entitlement. That man had almost died because the airline prioritized his comfort over basic safety. And he still didn't know. Jimmie's phone buzzed. Maya, CNN is picking up the story. Aerolink flight grounded after safety whistleblower alert. They don't have your name yet. Do we release it? He typed back, not yet, but schedule a meeting with the full board. Tomorrow morning, mandatory attendance. All of them? Every single one. Patterson cleared his throat. Mr. Roman, the FAA wants you to walk them through your findings. They're opening a full investigation into Aerolink's maintenance practices. Good. They're also asking about your removal from the flight, whether you want to file a formal complaint with the DOT. Jimmie watched Richard still arguing at the gate desk, oblivious. Watched David and Brenda emerge from the jet bridge, looking rattled, but not yet comprehending. Watched the other passengers mill about, alive because of a decision they'd never know was made. I'll handle it internally, Jimmie said. Internally? I'm the largest shareholder. This is my company to fix. Patterson's eyebrows rose. Yes. Then those people who removed you from your seat work for me. They just don't know it yet. Through the window, emergency vehicles still surrounded AF 2847, the plane that should have killed everyone aboard, the plane that David had been so eager to get into the air, the plane where Richard had reclaimed his seat with such casual entitlement, the plane that proved everything Jimmie had suspected about the company he'd invested in. Some truths you could find in spreadsheets and quarterly reports. Others you had to experience firsthand. He'd experienced both. Now came the reckoning. The conference room at JFK's Airport Administration building had fluorescent lights that made everyone look slightly sick. Jimmie preferred it that way. Truth looked better under harsh lighting. David Morgan and Brenda Moss sat across from him, confusion etched on their faces. They'd been summoned by airport security, told only that there was an incident requiring immediate attention involving Flight 2847. Neither had seen Jimmie yet. He stood in the back corner watching them through the one-way glass as Patterson prepared the room. Margaret arrived 10 minutes later, her executive composure cracking around the edges. She'd driven from Manhattan, probably breaking every speed limit. Behind her came two Aerolink attorneys, already looking defensive. "What's this about?" Margaret demanded. "We've cooperated fully with the FAA investigation." "Sit down, please." Patterson gestured to the table. They sat. The attorneys flanked Margaret like bodyguards. David and Brenda exchanged nervous glances. Then Jimmie walked in. Brenda's eyes went wide. David's face drained of color. Margaret's expression shifted from confusion to something approaching horror as recognition dawned. "You," David said. "You're the passenger from seat 3A. Jimmie's voice was calm, measured. "The passenger you threatened with security. The passenger you removed from a seat he'd purchased. The passenger who didn't look like he belonged in first class." Margaret stood abruptly. "Mr. Roman, I can explain." "Can you?" He set his laptop on the table, opened it. "Can you explain why your head flight attendant has reassigned premium seats 43 times in 18 months, 38 of which involved moving passengers of color? Can you explain why Ms. Moss checked my boarding pass 3 times while checking no one else's? Can you explain why Richard Caldwell's 5-year tradition of sitting in 3A somehow outweighed my confirmed reservation?" The room went silent. Brenda's hands trembled. I didn't know who you were." "That's the problem. It shouldn't matter who I am." Jimmie turned the laptop around. Security footage from the cabin filled the screen. The scene played out in brutal clarity. Brenda's suspicious glances, David's authoritative dismissal, Richard's entitled assumption. Every moment of humiliation captured in high definition. Brenda's face crumpled. "Oh my God!" "Keep watching." The video continued, Jimmie being escorted off the plane, the cabin full of passengers, none objecting, Richard settling into 3A like he'd won something, David's satisfied nod, then the emergency stop, the confusion, the return to gate, then footage from the FAA inspection, the engine casing split open, the fracture lines, the inspector's voice. This aircraft was approximately one flight from catastrophic failure. Margaret's hand went to her mouth. That plane, Jimmie said quietly, was going to kill everyone on board. The engine inspection was forged, maintenance records falsified, and it's not the only one. I have documentation showing 19 aircraft in your fleet with similar issues. That's impossible. It's documented. He pulled out a thick folder, dropped it on the table. Emails from your office pressuring maintenance to optimize schedules. Cost-cutting measures that eliminated redundant safety checks. Thomas Brennan systematically forging signatures to keep planes flying. And you, he looked directly at Margaret, approved every budget cut that made it possible. Her face went white. I never authorized anyone to skip safety inspections. You authorized cutting the maintenance budget by 40%. You authorized eliminating the independent safety auditor position. You authorized performance bonuses tied to on-time departures. What did you think would happen? One of the attorneys leaned forward. Mr. Roman, these are serious allegations. If you're planning legal action, I'm planning something more effective than legal action. He turned back to David and Brenda. They looked smaller now, hunched in their chairs like students called to the principal's office. Do you understand what happened today? Jimmie asked. You removed me from my seat because of how I looked. You assumed I didn't belong. You prioritized a white passenger's comfort over my confirmed reservation. And while you were doing that, I was saving your lives. Brenda's tears started falling. Real ones, not calculated for sympathy. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I wasn't thinking. You were thinking exactly what you've been trained to think. That some passengers matter more than others, that tradition and status trump fairness, that a black man in a hoodie couldn't possibly belong in first class. David's jaw clenched. I was following protocol. Protocol? Jimmie's voice hardened. Show me the protocol that says you check one passenger's ticket 3 times. Show me the protocol that says 5 years of sitting in a seat creates ownership. Show me the protocol that says you threaten passengers with no-fly lists for refusing to give up what they paid for. Silence. Margaret found her voice. Mr. Roman, we will conduct a full internal review. The employees involved will be disciplined. We take these matters extremely seriously. Do you? He pulled out another folder. 47 discrimination complaints in 6 months. All dismissed. All buried. You knew about the pattern. You chose to ignore it just like you chose to ignore the safety issues. We didn't know. You didn't want to know. That's worse. Jimmie stood, closing his laptop. The folder remained on the table. Evidence, accusation, and indictment all in one. I'm calling an emergency board meeting tomorrow morning, full attendance mandatory. We're going to discuss exactly what kind of company Airline is going to be going forward, because this, he gestured at the screen, frozen on an image of the fractured engine, ends now. He walked to the door, then paused. By the way, Richard Caldwell is in the terminal demanding another first-class seat. You might want to tell him that the seat he was so desperate to sit in almost killed him, and that the man he helped remove from the plane is the reason he's still alive. Jimmie left the room. Behind him, Brenda's sobs echoed in the fluorescent silence. The Airline boardroom occupied the 23rd floor of their headquarters in Queens. 12 leather chairs surrounded a table that had witnessed a decade of comfortable decisions, quarterly earnings reports, executive compensation packages, strategic initiatives that looked good on PowerPoint. Today would be different. Jimmie arrived at 7:47 a.m., 13 minutes before the mandatory meeting. The board members trickled in, their faces showing various degrees of confusion and concern. They knew Roman Equity held the controlling stake. Most had never met the man behind it. Margaret was already there, sitting apart from the others, eyes red-rimmed. She'd been up all night, Jimmie guessed, probably calling attorneys, probably calculating her career trajectory. By 8 all 11 voting board members had assembled, plus the 2 non-voting observers, the union representative and the FAA liaison, who'd been assigned after yesterday's incident. Jimmie stood at the head of the table and placed a single folder in front of him. Golden yellow, matching the boarding pass that had started everything. Good morning. For those who don't know me, I'm Jimmie Roman. I own 31% of this company through Roman Equity Partners. That makes me your largest shareholder and, as of this meeting, your most active one. The board shifted uncomfortably. They weren't used to shareholders who actually showed up. Yesterday, I was removed from Flight 2847 for sitting in my assigned first-class seat. The reason, though no one said it explicitly, was that I didn't look like I belonged there. I'm a black man in casual clothes. Your employees assumed I was either in the wrong seat or using a fraudulent ticket. They checked my boarding pass 3 times, prioritized a white passenger's undefined tradition over my confirmed reservation, and ultimately threatened me with security. Silence around the table. Margaret stared at her hands. While this was happening, I discovered that the same flight had a critically compromised engine that your maintenance department had knowingly cleared for service using forged inspection documents. That aircraft was approximately 1 flight away from catastrophic mechanical failure. I contacted the FAA and grounded the plane. 287 people are alive today because I did that. He opened the folder. This company has 2 systemic problems. The first is a culture of discrimination that treats passengers differently based on appearance and perceived status. The second is a pattern of safety violations driven by cost-cutting and schedule pressures. Both problems stem from failed leadership. Both end today. One of the board members, Gerald Strauss, former airline executive, cleared his throat. Mr. Roman, with all respect, you're describing isolated incidents. 47 documented discrimination complaints in 6 months, 19 aircraft with overdue critical inspections, 8 forged maintenance signatures, email chains showing executive awareness of both issues. That's not isolated. That's institutional. Jimmie pulled out a document, slid it across the table. This is my proposal. 7 immediate actions, non-negotiable, to be implemented within 30 days, or I will publicly divest my entire stake and recommend that every investor do the same. Given yesterday's near disaster and my documentation of the causes, I expect the stock would drop approximately 60% within a week. The board members reached for the document simultaneously. Jimmie watched their faces as they read. Margaret spoke first, her voice hollow. You're asking me to cut my salary by 40%. I'm requiring it. For 12 months. The money funds the reforms. And the maintenance chief, Thomas Brennan, is fired immediately. Criminal referral to the DOT Inspector General. Everyone who signed off on his forged documents faces the same. That's half the maintenance department. Then hire people who won't commit fraud. Pay them properly. Create a culture where safety isn't sacrificed for schedules. Gerald leaned forward. And the discrimination issue, you're proposing an independent oversight board? With real authority, monthly audits, public reporting of all complaints and resolutions, 0 tolerance for staff who show bias, and mandatory training for every customer-facing employee, 200 hours over 6 months. That's expensive. Not as expensive as a discrimination lawsuit or a wrongful death suit when one of your compromised planes falls from the sky. The room absorbed that. David Morgan and Brenda Moss, another board member asked, you're suspending them for 6 months with pay? Not firing them. Suspending with mandatory retraining. They're not evil people. They're people shaped by a broken system. We fix the system. We give them a chance to be better. They refuse the training or show continued bias, then termination. Margaret looked up. And you're taking an active role. Chairman of Safety and Ethics, no salary. For 2 years. to ensure these changes actually happen and aren't just PR. Why? She seemed genuinely confused. Why not just divest and walk away? Why expose yourself to this liability? Jimmie met her eyes. Because yesterday I sat in seat 3A and got judged by my skin color. I got threatened with a no-fly list for refusing to surrender something I'd paid for. I got walked off a plane in front of 300 people who assumed I'd done something wrong. And 30 minutes later, I saved all their lives. He let that sit. I could have walked away, let that plane take off, let the engine fail. Let everyone who humiliated me face consequences, but that's not who I am. And this, he gestured at the room, is my company. I own it, which means I'm responsible for fixing it. The silence stretched. Gerald broke it. What about Richard Caldwell, the passenger who demanded your seat? He's being invited to a meeting this afternoon. He doesn't know it yet, but he's going to become the face of our anti-discrimination campaign. He's going to tell his story, how his privilege almost killed him, how the man he helped remove saved his life. He's going to do it publicly, or his Diamond Elite status disappears and we publish every complaint filed against him. That's accountability, something this company hasn't practiced in years. Jimmie closed the folder. You have 5 minutes to discuss among yourselves. Then we vote. Approve these 7 measures unanimously, or I go public with everything I have. The discrimination, the safety fraud, the executive knowledge, all of it. Your choice. He walked to the window, turned his back, gave them privacy to panic. 4 minutes and 30 seconds later, Margaret spoke. We vote yes. All measures approved. Jimmie turned around. In writing, signed by every board member, legally binding. She nodded, already pulling out the documents. One more thing, Jimmie said. Tomorrow we hold a press conference. You're going to admit what happened, the discrimination, the safety violations, the institutional failures. You're going to announce these reforms, and you're going to apologize. Not a corporate non-apology, a real one. Margaret's hand shook as she signed. The media will destroy us. Maybe. Or maybe they'll see a company that owned its mistakes and fixed them. Either way, it's better than the alternative. The signatures went around the table. 11 names, 11 commitments. 11 people who'd just been forced to choose between comfortable corruption and uncomfortable accountability. They chose accountability. For now. The press conference happened at 2 p.m. the next day. Margaret stood at the podium, cameras flashing, reporters filling every seat in the AeroLink media room. Her hands gripped the edges of the lectern, steady despite everything. Yesterday, Flight 2847 was grounded due to a critical engine failure that our maintenance department had knowingly concealed through falsified inspection records. That aircraft was approximately 1 flight away from catastrophic failure. 287 passengers and crew were seconds from boarding a plane that could have killed them. The room erupted. Questions shouted over each other. Margaret raised her hand. Please, let me finish. She took a breath. The person who discovered this safety violation and contacted the FAA was Jimmie Roman, our largest shareholder. Mr. Roman was on that flight. 30 minutes before he made that call, our employees removed him from his assigned first-class seat because they assumed, based on his appearance, that he didn't belong there. They questioned his ticket 3 times. They prioritized another passenger's undefined tradition over his confirmed reservation. They threatened him with our no-fly list. The cameras swiveled. Jimmie sat in the front row, expression neutral. Mr. Roman could have walked away. Instead, he saved 287 lives, including the lives of the employees who had just humiliated him. Margaret's voice cracked slightly. This company has failed. We've created a culture where discrimination is tolerated and safety is compromised in the name of cost savings and customer convenience. That ends today. We are implementing 7 immediate reforms, detailed in the press packet. We are accepting full responsibility, and we are committing to become the standard for how airlines should operate, not the example of how they shouldn't. She stepped back. Jimmie rose and joined her at the podium. "I'm not here for revenge," he said simply. "I'm here because I own part of this company, which means I'm responsible for fixing it. Every passenger deserves dignity. Every flight deserves safety." It's not complicated. A reporter called out, "Will you pursue legal action?" "No. I'm pursuing something more effective, systematic change. You can sue a company into bankruptcy, or you can rebuild it into something worth believing in." He looked directly into the cameras. Seat 3A isn't just a chair on a plane. It's a symbol. It represents every time someone was judged by appearance instead of merit. Every time convenience trumped fairness. Every time we chose comfort over what's right. Jimmie's voice steadied. "Today, we choose differently." The room fell silent. Outside the windows, planes took off and landed, the rhythm of travel continuing, oblivious to the revolution happening in this small room. But revolutions often start small. One seat, one decision, one person refusing to accept that this is just how things are. Sometimes, that's enough to change everything. Have you ever been judged for not looking like you belong? Have you stayed silent when you witnessed discrimination because speaking up felt risky? The first step toward change is acknowledging it happened. If this story moved you, share it with someone in leadership or customer service. Real change starts when enough people decide the old way isn't acceptable. Your voice matters.